Welcome to Mr. Phantom Channel, a place where spiritual mysteries and ghostly stories are unveiled. This is not for the faint of heart, but a doorway into another realm, a world where the shadows murmur the truth. If you're a fan of spine-chilling tales and the supernatural, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our haunting explorations. Get ready. The darkness holds secrets waiting to be discovered. The haunting at the old restaurant. It was late December, and Beijing was engulfed in the bitter cold of winter. Snow blanketed the streets and bare trees, creating a serene yet desolate atmosphere. Li, a young office worker, was tasked by her boss to arrange the company's year-end party. After consulting her colleagues, she decided on an old, prestigious restaurant in Beijing's ancient quarters, renowned for its vintage charm and traditional cuisine. When Lian called the restaurant to make a reservation, a young receptionist answered, "Welcome to Beijing Restaurant. How may I assist you?" Her soft, reassuring voice put Lian at ease as they discussed the number of tables, menu options, and the timing of the event. Midway through their conversation, the receptionist said, "Please hold for a moment while I check our availability." Then, something strange happened. As the line went silent, Lian suddenly heard the sound of wind howling through the receiver, accompanied by faint shuffling footsteps. A chilling voice, low and icy, whispered distinctly, "Be careful! Don't look back!" Lian froze, her heart racing. She quickly dismissed it as her imagination playing tricks on her. Moments later, the receptionist returned, her voice calm and professional as if nothing had happened. "Thank you for waiting. We've reserved the tables per your request." Lian brushed off the eerie moment and moved on with her day, unaware of what was to come. The evening of the year-end party arrived, and the entire company gathered at Beijing Restaurant. The venue exuded a timeless elegance, with red lanterns hanging from wooden beams, lacquered wooden furniture, and traditional Chinese paintings adorning the walls. The warm, golden glow of the lights created a lively and festive atmosphere as laughter and conversations filled the air. Lian sat at the corner of a table, the strange feeling from her phone call fading amidst the cheerful company. She smiled as her colleagues toasted each other, and waiters brought out steaming dishes one after another. As the event neared its end, Lian excused herself to use the restroom. The restrooms were located at the end of a long, dimly lit corridor where the faint light from the lanterns barely pierced through the darkness. Her footsteps echoed softly on the cold tiles. When she entered the restroom, an icy chill enveloped her. A gust of wind hissed through a cracked window, making her shiver. Then, in the stillness, she heard it again, a faint, chilling whisper. "Don't look!" Lian's breath caught in her throat. The voice was so close it felt as if someone was standing right behind her. She spun around, her eyes darting across the empty restroom. There was no one there, only the flickering shadows cast by the weak lantern light from outside. Then, out of nowhere, a piercing scream erupted near her ear. It wasn't just one scream. It was a cacophony of voices, layered and agonized, as though dozens of people were crying out in unison. Overwhelmed with terror, Lian bolted out of the restroom, her legs trembling as she stumbled down the corridor. When Lian returned to her table, her colleagues noticed her pale face and asked if she was feeling unwell. She shook her head, too shaken to explain what had happened. Determined to stay calm, she endured the rest of the evening until the event finally concluded. As the party ended and her colleagues began leaving, Leon stayed behind to settle the bill at the front desk. The receptionist that night was an older woman, a stark contrast to the youthful voice she had spoken to over the phone. Unable to suppress her curiosity, Leon asked hesitantly, "Has anything strange ever happened at this restaurant?" The receptionist paused and looked at her with a knowing expression. "Did you hear something?" she asked cautiously. Leon nodded silently. After a moment of hesitation, the receptionist leaned in and began to explain. "Over 20 years ago, there was an incident here. A group of drunk customers got into an altercation with the staff. In the chaos, a young receptionist was fatally injured in the hallway leading to the restrooms." Leon felt the blood drain from her face. The details matched too perfectly: the hallway, the chilling voice, the overwhelming screams. "Since then," the receptionist continued, "strange occurrences have been reported by both staff and customers. Some say she still lingers here, unable to move on." After the party, Leon couldn't shake the memory of what had happened at Beijing restaurant. Every time she answered a phone call, she felt the eerie sensation of cold wind brushing past her ear, accompanied by faint whispers. Her nights were plagued by nightmares, images of the dim hallway, the broken whispers, and the piercing screams replaying in her mind. Though she tried to convince herself it was all in her head, the memories clung to her like a shadow. Even during the day, she felt as if someone was constantly watching her, their presence just beyond her line of sight. In time, Leon decided to leave her job and move to a different city, hoping to escape the haunting experiences. But no matter where she went, the faint whispers and the chilling memory of that fateful night continued to follow her. And in the cold, quiet nights, as the wind howled outside her window, she couldn't help but wonder, is she still out there, watching?
The Girl in the Painting. Jonathan Miller was the quintessential office lawyer in New York City, known for his rigid adherence to rules and meticulousness in his work. He had earned a reputation as the firm's rule enforcer. His colleagues often described him as cold, inflexible, and overly serious. What they didn't know, however, was that outside the sterile walls of his office, Jonathan was a different man altogether. In his free time, he indulged in his love for art, antiques, and craftsmanship. His apartment was a reflection of his eclectic taste, walls adorned with vintage clocks, shelves filled with hand-carved sculptures, and tables showcasing rare trinkets he had picked up from flea markets and estate sales. Every weekend, Jonathan would retreat from his professional persona and immerse himself in the world of forgotten treasures at old markets and antique stores. One Saturday, while browsing a quaint flea market on the outskirts of the city, Jonathan's attention was drawn to a peculiar painting. It was a small, old oil painting, framed in tarnished gold, depicting the back of a woman sitting alone under a twilight sky. The colors were muted, the edges of the canvas cracked and weathered with time. Yet there was something profoundly melancholic and captivating about the image. The woman's posture under the fading light seemed to whisper a story that demanded to be told. Jonathan couldn't resist. Despite its age and wear, he purchased the painting and brought it home. He hung it on the wall above his living room fireplace, where he could admire it while he worked on his personal art projects. In the days following the painting's arrival, Jonathan began to notice strange occurrences around his apartment. First, it was subtle, soft creaking sounds in the living room, as though someone were shifting weight on the old wooden floors. Then came the faint rustling, like fabric brushing against a surface, and the occasional sensation of being watched. Late one night, Jonathan was awakened by the sound of soft humming. He sat up in bed, his heart pounding, and strained to listen. The melody was faint but unmistakable, drifting from the direction of the living room. Summoning his courage, he tiptoed to the living room and turned on the light. Nothing. The room was empty, and the painting hung silently on the wall. He stood there for a moment, staring at the image of the lonely woman under the twilight sky. The longer he looked, the more he felt as though the woman's figure had shifted slightly, as if her shoulders were now more slouched, her sadness heavier. Shaking his head, Jonathan dismissed it as a trick of his tired mind. A week later, the haunting escalated. One night, as Jonathan sat sketching at his desk, he heard the familiar creaking noise from the living room. Determined to confront whatever was causing these disturbances, he grabbed a flashlight and quietly made his way to the living room. As he entered, his breath caught in his throat. There, sitting on the armchair by the fireplace, was the woman from the painting. Her figure was faint, almost translucent, yet unmistakably real. She wore the same flowing dress as in the painting, her back still turned to him. "Who are you?" Jonathan whispered, his voice trembling. At the sound of his voice, the woman slowly turned her head, revealing a face etched with sorrow. But before he could take another step, she vanished, leaving only the faintest trace of her presence in the air. That night, Jonathan had a vivid dream. In it, the woman appeared, standing in a field bathed in twilight. Her voice was soft but heavy with pain. "My name is Eleanor," she began. "I was betrayed by the one I loved most. He painted me this painting and gave it to me as a token of his devotion. But when his love turned to lies, I couldn't bear it. I took my own life beneath the old oak tree where we first met." Eleanor's form flickered, her voice growing fainter. "I've been trapped in this painting ever since, bound by my sorrow and anger toward him. Please, help me find peace." In the dream, she pointed toward a location, a hill with a lone oak tree standing at its crest. Jonathan woke with a start. The image of the tree burned into his mind. Moved by Eleanor's story, Jonathan resolved to help her. He knew he couldn't erase her pain, but perhaps he could offer her a new perspective. He set up his easel in the living room and began painting. Instead of recreating the original painting, Jonathan envisioned a brighter scene. He painted Eleanor, no longer with her back turned, but facing forward, her expression serene. Above her, a vibrant sky stretched out, painted in hues of dawn, with a flock of birds soaring upward, a symbol of freedom and release. When the painting was complete, Jonathan carefully removed the old painting from its frame and replaced it with his new creation. He drove to the location Eleanor had shown him in his dream, a quiet hill outside the city, where a gnarled old oak tree stood alone. Beneath the tree, Jonathan dug a small hole and buried the original painting. Standing there, he whispered, "Eleanor, may you find the peace you deserve. Your story doesn't end here. It begins anew." That night, Jonathan dreamed of Eleanor once more. She stood under a radiant sky, her figure glowing with warmth. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You've given me freedom, and for that, I'll always be thankful." As she spoke, her form began to fade, replaced by the image of a soaring bird disappearing into the light. When Jonathan woke, the apartment was silent, peaceful. He walked into the living room and looked at the new painting on the wall. Eleanor was still there, but now she seemed alive, her face filled with hope rather than sorrow. From that day on, the strange noises ceased, and Jonathan felt a sense of calm settle over his home. The experience had left an indelible mark on him, reminding him of the power of art to heal, transform, and set free even the most tormented of spirits. And whenever he gazed at the painting, he couldn't help but smile, knowing that somewhere out there, Eleanor had finally found her peace. Mystery of the Ancient Graves. It was December, the height of summer in Australia. The holiday season had arrived, and three friends, Sam, Lisa, and Andrew, who worked together in the same office, decided to escape the hustle and bustle with a camping trip. The chosen destination was a forest 50 kilometers from town, a place renowned for its beauty and solitude. They packed their gear, food, and Sam's golden retriever, Max, a playful and curious companion always ready for adventure. "This is going to be amazing," Sam said enthusiastically as they loaded the car. Lisa, ever the cautious one, reminded them, "Just remember, we need to leave the forest before dark. It's not exactly safe out there at night." Andrew, the calm and collected one, reassured her with a smile. "Don't worry, as long as we stick to the plan, we'll be fine." After an hour's drive, they reached the edge of the forest. Tall trees loomed overhead, their canopies casting cool shadows over the dirt path. Max barked excitedly, running circles around them as if sensing the adventure ahead. The group began their search for a suitable campsite while collecting firewood along the way. The forest was peaceful, with only the sound of rustling leaves and the occasional bird call breaking the silence. As they ventured deeper into the woods, Lisa suddenly stopped and pointed ahead. "Guys, look at that!" What lay before them was an ancient graveyard. Weathered stone headstones, covered in moss and overgrown with roots, stood silently among the trees. Some were tilted, almost swallowed by the earth, while others were completely entangled in thick vines. Sam approached one of the gravestones and squinted to read the faded inscriptions. "This must be from the 19th century," he said in awe. "Probably the graves of early settlers." Andrew scanned the area uneasily. "We shouldn't linger here too long. Places like this don't usually have the best vibes." Lisa nodded. "Let's gather our firewood and find somewhere else to set up camp." As they busied themselves collecting dry branches, Max suddenly perked up, barked loudly, and bolted down a narrow, overgrown trail leading deeper into the forest. "Max, get back here," Sam called out, but the dog was already out of sight. The group quickly dropped their bundles of firewood and ran after him. Following the sound of his barking, the trail grew narrower and darker, the canopy above blocking out most of the sunlight. When they finally caught up, they found Max standing in front of another graveyard. This one was different. It was smaller, but its purpose was clear. It was a children's graveyard. The headstones were smaller, some adorned with carvings of toys, teddy bears, and other childlike symbols. Max lay on his back, wagging his tail gleefully as if playing with someone. The unsettling part was, there was no one there. Lisa whispered, her voice tinged with fear. "Who is Max playing with?" Andrew's tone turned firm. "We need to leave. Now." As Sam knelt to leash Max, the dog suddenly stood up and ran again, this time deeper into the children's graveyard. He stopped in front of a small grave and lay down, his eyes fixed on the headstone. The group hesitantly approached and read the inscription. "Emily White, 1894 to 1902, our beloved daughter, the light of our lives." Below the inscription, an older carving had been etched crudely into the stone. "Please don't forget me." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. She was only 8 years old. Sam knelt beside Max, stroking his fur as the dog remained still, almost as if keeping vigil. Andrew spoke softly. "Maybe Max senses something. We can't do much, but we should at least leave something behind to show we care." Moved by the solemn atmosphere, the group decided to honor Emily's memory. They gathered wildflowers from the surrounding area and placed them gently on her grave. Lisa, ever prepared, pulled out a small ribbon from her bag, usually used for tying gear, and fashioned it into a delicate bow, placing it atop the flowers. Sam, after a moment of thought, removed Max's collar, a leather band adorned with a small tag engraved with Max's name, and laid it beside the flowers. "Hopefully, this brings her a little joy," he murmured. Max wagged his tail softly, letting out a quiet bark as if in agreement. The group left the children's graveyard with lighter hearts. They soon found a clearing nearby and set up their campsite. As night fell, the glow of their campfire and the sound of their laughter replaced the eerie silence of the forest. Max, back to his usual playful self, darted around the fire, chasing moths and wagging his tail as if the events of earlier had never happened. Staring up at the star-filled sky, Lisa reflected aloud. This trip has been strange, but it's also been meaningful. Sometimes the smallest gestures can create a connection we never expect. Andrew nodded thoughtfully. I like to think that Emily felt our presence today. Maybe she's at peace now. When they returned to town, the group chose not to share their experience with anyone. It became a quiet secret between them, a story they would always carry in their hearts. Sam replaced Max's collar with a new one, but he kept the old collar as a keepsake, a reminder of the mysterious day in the forest. Every time he looked at it, he thought of Emily, the little girl they had never met, but whose memory had touched them so deeply. The camping trip ended with laughter and joy, but the tale of the ancient children's graveyard and their loyal dog would remain an unforgettable chapter in their lives. The haunted house in Germany. The small house was located on the outskirts of a quiet town near the Black Forest, Schwarzwald, in Germany. It was being sold at an unbelievably low price, catching the attention of Friedrich Wagner, a middle-aged German lawyer. After years of working at a law firm in Frankfurt, he decided to move to the countryside to seek peace after the loss of his wife a few years ago. The seller, a middle-aged man, seemed to be in a rush to close the deal. I need to sell quickly and leave, the man explained in German. This house is wonderful, but I have no reason to stay here anymore. His urgency led to further price reductions, and Friedrich didn't question the offer. The first few days in the house were peaceful. The property was isolated from neighbors, situated near a dense forest of towering fir trees. Every morning, Friedrich jogged along the narrow road leading into the woods, savoring the fresh air and tranquility. Life followed a predictable routine, working at a law firm in Freiburg during the day, returning home in the evening, and spending nights relaxing with a German beer and an English novel. The backyard, with its small garden and wild rose bushes, became his favorite place to reflect. But this peace didn't last long. One afternoon, while watering the plants in his backyard, Friedrich spotted the figure of a young woman. She stood in the middle of the yard, motionless, with long blonde hair cascading down her back. Her floral dress was soaked with blood. Her pale face and sorrowful eyes seemed to plead for help. "Do you need help?" Friedrich asked nervously in German, his voice trembling. The woman didn't respond. She simply stared at him, her lips moving as if trying to say something. When he stepped closer, her figure vanished, leaving the yard eerily silent, save for the faint chirping of birds in the distance. Friedrich tried to convince himself that he had imagined it, but unease gnawed at him. The following day, as he walked home from the subway station near his house, he saw the woman again. This time, she appeared on the other side of the narrow village road, illuminated faintly by the weak yellow glow of street lamps. Her steps were slow and deliberate, her eyes following him closely, determined to ignore her. Friedrich quickened his pace, yet her shadowy figure seemed to trail him from afar. When he finally reached his door, he rushed inside, locked it securely, and collapsed against it, panting. By now, he realized she wasn't human. She was a ghost. That night, Friedrich had a vivid and unsettling dream. He found himself standing in his backyard under the pale glow of the moonlight filtering through the tall trees. The woman appeared before him, tears glistening in her eyes, her floral dress still stained with blood. "Please help me," she pleaded in a weak voice, speaking German. "I died unjustly. My husband abused and killed me, then buried my body here." She pointed to a large tree in the yard. "Beneath the soil lies the evidence. He thinks no one will ever uncover his crime." Before Friedrich could ask more, the vision of the woman faded into the mist surrounding him. The next morning, Friedrich decided to investigate the tree she had indicated. Borrowing a spade from his neighbor, he began digging into the soft soil. It wasn't long before he unearthed a rusted metal box buried beneath the ground. Inside were personal belongings, a wedding ring, a photograph of the woman with a tall man, and a handwritten note. The note was a brief journal entry, in shaky handwriting. The woman described days of relentless abuse by her husband. In one fit of rage, he had beaten her to death and buried her body in the backyard to cover up his crime. Friedrich took all the evidence to the local police station. First, the authorities were skeptical of his story. However, after cross-referencing with missing person reports, they discovered that the woman had been reported missing several years earlier. Her husband, a man who had once lived in the house, had abruptly left Germany soon after her disappearance. Acting on Friedrich's information, the police excavated the backyard. As the ghost had indicated, they uncovered the woman's remains, wrapped in an old cloth beneath the soil. With the evidence and clues gathered, the police launched a manhunt for the husband, who had fled to another country. That night, after the police had completed their work at the scene, Friedrich had the most peaceful sleep in weeks. In his dream, the woman appeared once more, her face radiant and her dress pristine white. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "Because of you, I am free. Justice will be served for his crimes." When Friedrich awoke, the house felt warmer and calmer. There were no more eerie noises, no more glimpses of her figure in the mist. The haunting had ended. The story of the haunted house near the Black Forest spread throughout the town. Through his courage and sense of justice, Friedrich not only helped bring closure to a tragic mystery, but also turned the house into a symbol of truth and light prevailing over darkness. From then on, he lived in the house peacefully, cherishing the strange yet meaningful memories it had given him.
Thank you for spending your time with us tonight, exploring these mysterious and spine-chilling stories. If these tales have sparked your curiosity or left you with unforgettable feelings, don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've had similar paranormal experiences that you'd like to share, feel free to send your story to the email address provided in the description. Who knows? Your story might become part of our journey into the spiritual world in a future episode. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our haunting tales. See you in the next episode, and remember, always keep a light by your side.